Stargrass is the most underrated aquarium plant out there. It's one of very few plants that checks all the boxes. Great as foreground, midground, or background. How many plants can cover the entirety of a tank so beautifully like this one? Another thing that I love about Stargrass is that it can grow in just about any planted tank as long as it's got a full spectrum light. The only downside to this plant is that it can be a little hard to find locally. Follow along today as I cover everything you need to know about this amazing stem plant. What up, fish friends? Michael with Fresh Flow Aquatics coming at you with another plant guide today. Stargrass, or Heteranthera zosterifolia for its scientific name, grows naturally in almost stagnant to slow-moving waters in Brazil. You can see some neat footage of this plant growing in the wild if you watch the BBC's Green Planet, the aquatic episode. At its base, Stargrass starts out as a tiny little stem, then truncates out towards the top into a thick mass of stems. The footage shows how massive this plant can get. It's really worth a watch if you have access to it. Like I've already mentioned, this is a very easy plant to grow. The biggest thing to consider is that you'll want to have at least moderate lighting to get some good leaf growth out of Stargrass. While Stargrass can grow just fine in low lighting conditions, you won't get those long, lush leaves that look like stars. Another advantage to using higher lighting is that you'll get tons of offshoots from this plant, resulting in denser, bushier growth. Looking in this tank, you can see that almost all the stems are just growing straight up as a single stalk with barely any shooters. In my high-tech tank, Stargrass sends out heads in every direction. It's the fastest growing plant in this tank. When I hack it back to almost the base, it bounces back to a full crown in about a week. Otherwise, Stargrass has a lot of similar demands to many other easy stem plants. It will grow just fine in water with almost no minerals or in tanks with relatively high GH, KH, and pH. You can use CO2 and fertilizer like I do in my high-tech tank, or you cannot, like this tank here. Soil, whether aquatic or straight up dirt, is a good idea to get optimal growth from Stargrass. Sometimes I like to experiment with clippings to see if they'll continue to grow unplanted just as they float around in the water column, and Stargrass appears to be capable of doing that, but in my opinion, this is a plant that you want to bury in the substrate so that it can grow vertically. That's when you really get to enjoy the star-shaped leaf pattern at the top of each stem. That's how it grows in nature and naturally yields the best results that way. You can blast Stargrass with a ton of flow or grow it in absolutely no current at all, like I do in this tank. Unlike many other plants in the aquarium industry, Stargrass is a truly aquatic plant. It does not want to grow outside of water. I've read accounts of people growing it out of water, and I know that I've purchased Stargrass that's been grown terrestrially, but I personally have not succeeded in growing it that way. Apparently, it needs tons of humidity to grow out of water. It's clearly not meant to be for me, at least, because I live in a very dry climate. There is only one type of Stargrass, or Heteranthera zosterifolia, when it comes to the hobby, but you can get slightly different results by growing it in different conditions. I've already touched on the fact that more light, nutrients, and CO2 will help to get fuller looking plants. Something else that tends to happen in lower lighting is that the leaves will get a black hue to the underside. I've read that this is something that makes the plant appealing and should be something that you're aiming for, but in my opinion, it's a sign of weaker growth. In lower energy systems, bottom portions of the plant are much more prone to this blackening phenomenon, while in higher energy systems, leaves tend to stay bright green to the base of the plant. If you notice that your Stargrass is showing signs of blackening, it's not a code red. That's normal for the plant under conditions that I've mentioned, but it can continue to grow and still be a fun and healthy plant to have. One other minor difference in appearance between low and high energy systems is that this plant will be putting out a lot more roots on the higher energy side, especially after trimming. You'll be able to see the roots popping out of the stems left and right. In lower energy systems, the roots seem to be pretty confined to the soil or substrate layer. Trimming and propagating stargrass goes hand in hand. In order to propagate it, all you do is take a clipping and plant it in the soil. I always try my best to clip each stem rather than hack through it like a weed whacker. If you do the weed whacker approach, you'll end up smashing some of the rings of foliage. To be clear, this is a great way to save some time and won't harm the plant. I may be just a little too attached to my plants. The other way to trim is by individual stem. The advantage to this is that you can clip in between nodes and not end up with as much leaf damage, and results in a nicer looking finish after the trimming. Another thing to note with trimming is that you'll get root growth from all the nodes, the points where leaves grow out of a stem after trimming. So if I cut here, all the nodes under this point will start to grow roots like crazy. This is something that I really only observe in my high-tech tank, so I make sure to trim the plants to the level of the hardscape in front of them. That way, all the root expansion isn't visible. Maybe twice a year or so, I'll go through and pull all the stems up and replant the heads. This is important to prevent overcrowding underneath where all the roots grow. If it becomes too crowded, water will become stagnant and possibly result in a bit of rot and poor plant growth. Stargrass is not an overly available plant. I shop around at a lot of fish stores in northern Colorado, and I've only seen it on a couple occasions growing in vitro. Personally, I'm not a fan of that because you spend a ton of money and get a tiny little plant that takes forever to fill in. I would recommend you hop online and order some full-grown stems. My go-to for ordering is Aquarium Plants Factory. One other place to check is Facebook Marketplace. There are a couple people in my region that sell them pretty cheap on Marketplace, so worth a look. Let me know, have you been growing stargrass, or are you looking to try it out for the first time? If you have, what's your experience been? If you found this video helpful or fun, please consider supporting me by subscribing and watching some other of my videos. There is no cost associated with watching my channel, but I do put a lot of time and effort in making educational content, and I really appreciate the support that most people give me. Thanks so much, and until next time, see ya!